We have the sacred assurance of the Gita that from time to time the divine champion of the good arises to challenge the reign of the evil. When misfortune from all directions swarms to attack the living spirit of the nation, its anguished cry calls forth from its own being the liberator to its rescue. Tagore confessed he had felt misgivings in the uncertain twilight of the dawn of Subhash Chandra's political sadhana or quest. But now that he was revealed in the pure light of midday sun, there was no room for any doubt. Tagore was not setting up the warrior in counterpoise to the saint. Let nobody make such a grievous mistake as to think, he clarified, that in foolish pride of narrow provincialism, I desire to see Bengal as an entity separate from the rest of India, or dream of setting up in my own province a rival throne to the one on which is seated a majestic figure representing a new age in the political history of the world. Yet he saw Subhash Chandra as the deliverer, who would claim of his countrymen the resoluteness, the unyielding will to live and to conquer strengthened by the inspiration of his own life. I may not join him in the fight that is to come, the 78-year-old poet wrote in conclusion. I can only bless him and take my leave knowing that he has made his country's burden of sorrow his own, and his final reward is fast coming as his country's freedom. On April 20th, 1943, the Japanese submarine I-29 left Penang with the flotilla commander, Captain Masao Teraoka, on board. Local Indians were somewhat intrigued by the crew's decision to buy supplies for the preparation of Indian meals prior to their departure. On April 26th, the Japanese submarine spotted this German counterpart at approximately 25 degrees south latitude and 60 degrees east longitude in the Indian Ocean, some 400 nautical miles off the coast of Madagascar. Having surfaced at their prearranged rendezvous point, the crews discovered the Germans rowed a rubber dinghy back to their submarine, dragging a strong manila hemp rope. Subhash Chandra Bose and Abid Hassan climbed down from the U-180 into the raft and made their way through the surging sea towards the I-29. Drenched to their bones, the Indian leader and his adjutant clambered onto the Japanese submarine to a very warm welcome. An astonishing military feat had been accomplished, the only submarine-to-submarine transfer of passengers in the annals of World War II in waters where the enemy was superior in air and naval power. The mortality rate on German U-boats ran above 80%, and the risk had been immense. The German sailor who took photographs of this daring voyage and transfer was killed on his next mission. He left his pictures, including this one, with his mother, saying that someone from India will one day ask for them. And you have many more such photographs at the museum set up by the Netaji Research Bureau in Calcutta. The German officers and crew had been friendly and courteous to their Indian guests throughout the arduous journey in the most cramped conditions. Yet on boarding the Japanese submarine, they felt something akin to a homecoming. Immediately we had that feeling, Abid Hassan remembered. Netaji had that feeling. We could be less formal, although we had to be more formal. The Japanese submarine was also more spacious than the German one. The flotilla commander, Masao Teraoka, vacated his cabin for Subhash Chandra Bose. The captain of the submarine, Juiki Izu, organized a party on April 29th to celebrate the unique achievement of successfully transferring Bose and his aide and to honor the Japanese emperor on his birthday. The Indians felt they had come back to an Asian nation, and the food prepared by Japanese cooks with Indian spices obtained in Penang suited their taste. 4 meals a day, however, was a little too much for Netaji. Do we have to eat again, Captain Teraoka, he asked with a smile as he was swamped with Japanese hospitality. The I-29 passed to the south of India on its way to Southeast Asia. Outside the British patrolling radius, it picked up a radio message from Penang to divert and take the passengers to Sabang, the tiny islet off the North Sumatran coast. Swirling rumors in Penang about Bose's impending arrival made this diversion necessary. On May 6, 1943, the I-29 safely docked in the harbour at Sabang. It had played its part in the history of World War II. Juiki Izu was soon transferred as the skipper of the I-11 that went missing in the Central Pacific early next year. An American submarine eventually sank the I-29 near the Philippines in July 1944. Subhash Chandra Bose posed for a photograph with the entire crew of the Japanese submarine before disembarking at Sabang. He autographed this picture with a grateful message. "It was a great pleasure to sail aboard this submarine. I believe this will mark a milestone in our fight for victory and peace." After a few days' rest, Subhash Chandra Bose boarded a small Japanese combat aircraft on his way to Tokyo. After several halts in Penang, Saigon, Manila, Taipei, and Hamamatsu, he eventually arrived in the Japanese capital in mid-May. He returned to Singapore a month and a half later and assumed the leadership of the Indian independence movement on July 4th, 1943. And on July 5th, he addressed the Indian National Army for the first time. The army had assembled on the Padang in front of the town hall in Singapore. Indians in Singapore and Malaya responded with great enthusiasm to his patriotic call. Women volunteered to join the Rani of Jhansi regiment of the Indian National Army. One of them, Datin Janaki Thevara Thinahappan, still lives in Kuala Lumpur. One major achievement of the INA was the unity that it achieved among Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians, and others. Netaji turned out to be a very successful fundraiser, ensuring receipts of nearly $2 million Straits dollars a month by the close of 1943. At a particularly successful event attended by 15,000 Indians at Penang in August 1943, he raised 2 million Straits dollars in one day. The Chettiars from Tamil Nadu were among the big contributors to the coffers of the Azad Hind government formed in Singapore on October 21st, 1943. There is a journal called Young India that used to come out. This is the cover of a September 19th, 1943 issue. And there you have glimpses of what was going on in Malaya. Kuala Lumpur was one area from a message came in. At Kuala Lumpur, an enthusiastic reception was accorded to Netaji, not only by Indians, but by other nationalities also. And there was a garland presented to Netaji at the public meeting. It was auctioned. When the well-known Chettiar Bank of Kuala Lumpur, MCTM, bought it for 25,000. It was then sort of re-auctioned, and another Nattukottai Chettiar bank contributed another 10,000, the KVA LM. And so the garland presented to Netaji in Kuala Lumpur had fetched 35,000 Straits dollars in sort of one day. Perak was another place from which there was a report which said, Perak Indians headed by S.T. Sinakatti, chairman of the Indian Independence League Perak branch, accorded a rousing welcome to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Netaji's appeal met with an immediate response, and a check of Straits dollars 1 million was presented to Netaji by the chairman of the league on behalf of the local Indians. And there were 6 garlands that were presented and which were auctioned for $21,000. $1 fetched 10,000. The highest bidder was Sri M.S.M.M. Alagappa Chettiar. Indian women who had gathered to receive Netaji handed over the jewelry they were wearing, which brought in a sum of $100,000 and $25,000 in cash donations. So these are the kinds of reports that we find in the local journals in the last 6 months of 1943. Now, soon after his arrival in Singapore, Netaji had felt the need for a wireless link with Bengal. The spies that the Japanese had sent into India had not been very successful. Netaji tried to assert control over intelligence operations based in Penang and also Rangoon, and put N.G. Swami in charge of what came to be called the Azad School in this city. 4 well-trained intelligence operatives, Bhagwan Lu, Harbans Lal, Kanwal Singh, and Kartar Singh, had accompanied Swami on the journey from Europe to Asia on the blockade runner SS Osorno in March 1943. Netaji, Swami, and Abid Hassan now put these 4 together with another 4 trained in Penang and dispatched this group of 8 under the leadership of S.N. Chopra towards India on board a Japanese submarine on December 8, 1943. The group landed with their sophisticated wireless equipment, weapons, and money on the Kathiawar coast of Gujarat on the night of December 22nd, 23rd, 1943. They were instructed to split into 4 pairs and head towards Bengal, the northwest frontier, the United Provinces in northern India, and Bombay. Late in December, Bhagwan Lu, under the cover of his pseudonym T.K. Rao, called at Woodburn Park in Calcutta to see Shishir Kumar Bose, the nephew who had driven Subhash during his January 1941 escape. After a spell in prison for taking part in the Quit India movement, Shishir was then home interned with permission to travel to medical college for his studies. The family was in mourning as Prabhavati, the matriarch, had just passed away. Rao handed Shishir a handwritten message in Bengali from Subhash on the letterhead of the Indian Independence League at 3 Chancery Lane in Singapore, dated Sri Sri Kali Puja, October 29, 1943, the day of the worship of the mother goddess Kali. Subhash had told his elder brother Sharot and Shishir that his messages in Bengali would be genuine, while those in English might be intended to mislead the British. Both Shishir and his mother Bibhabati recognized Subhash's handwriting. Shishir then put Rao in touch with those members of the underground organization Bengal Volunteers who had managed to stay out of prison. In January 1944, radio contact was successfully established between Calcutta and Subhash Chandra Bose in Burma. One of the earliest messages transmitted did not contain any valuable military intelligence. It conveyed the news of Prabhavati's death. "You look tired," Debnath Das, one of his associates, told Netaji that evening. "No, I am not tired," Bose replied. "I heard today that I have lost my mother." The inability of the Japanese and the INA to break through into Bengal undermined the strategy of an internal revolt to coincide with the military thrust from outside. The British were able to, over time, to capture many of the secret agents sent by submarine mostly from Penang to India. Even the best equipped and best trained group under S.N. Chopra had 2 weak links. The local Gujarati Ismail Chania, included in the party for his knowledge of local terrain on the Kathiawar coast, gave himself up within 2 weeks on January 3rd, 1944. Since the group had planned to meet in Benares once a month, the others were seized by the British police over the next few months, and 5 of them sentenced to death. It is probable that 3 were used for counterintelligence operations. The second vulnerable spot was the northwest frontier, where Bhagat Ram, who had helped Netaji hitchhike his way across the tribal territories to Afghanistan in 1941, was by now passing on the information that was being received from Netaji to the Communist Party leadership for onward transmission to the British government. The German minister in Kabul, Pilger, recorded in one of his dispatches that secret agents had claimed that Sharat Bose's son, Shishir, had authenticated a message carried by this group. This information found its way into communist hands. Almost simultaneously with the debacle in Imphal and Kohima, where the INA was stopped from their march towards Delhi, the British police raided the Calcutta hideout of the revolutionaries who were seeking to support Netaji. One of them was killed in the raid, others were arrested and transported to the Lahore fort to be kept in confinement without trial. Shishir was handed a charge sheet which read as follows: "You, Shishir Bose, are informed that the grounds for your detention are that you were acting in a manner prejudicial to the defense of British India, inasmuch as in collaboration with members of the Bengal Volunteer Group and others, you were actively engaged in a manner calculated to assist Subhash Chandra Bose and the Japanese. The quaint prose notwithstanding, the charge was clear and accurate enough. Shishir was held without trial, even though there were other instances of trials in camera and harsh sentences. Richard Tottenham of the Home Department, who interrogated the secret agents and the Indian revolutionaries, reported a total of 7 trials of quote-unquote enemy agents during 1944-1945, 3 in Delhi, 3 in Madras, and 1 in Bengal. Altogether, 23 secret agents sent from Southeast Asia, again mostly from Penang, were sentenced to death, but the sentences of 2 of them were later commuted to imprisonment for life. One prisoner, sentenced to death, Amerik Singh Gill, escaped while being transported under police guard in Calcutta. And decades later, I met Amerik Singh Gill in Kuala Lumpur. That is where he led the rest of his life. The idea of Asia and the spirit of Asian universalism were in important ways products of cosmopolitan thought zones created by passages across the Indian Ocean. In this sense, the continent Asia and the ocean, the Indian Ocean, were not necessarily in an adversarial relationship, but provided different contours of interregional arenas animated by the flows of ideas and culture. Binoy Kumar Sarkar, a leading sociologist, writing in the Modern Review in the 1910s, stressed both sea lanes and land routes in creating what he called an Asia sense. By the 1920s, most contributors to the same journal were more enamored of the oceanic connections that spread Indian cultural influences to Southeast Asia. In re-envisioning the idea of Asia for what many anticipate might be an Asian century, it is necessary to take a normative and ethical position on the side of a generous universalism against the hubris of an arrogant imperialism and narrow nationalism. The universalist current was more creative and generous in its delineation of cultural commonalities and differences. Riding this current, Buddhist missionaries, Muslim mystics, anti-colonial visionaries, and humanist scholars have traversed the Indian Ocean from South to Southeast Asia and back over the centuries. The most sophisticated Asian intellectuals of the last 2 centuries aspired to exactly that kind of universal humanity for which the ocean served as the best metaphor. In Penang, on October 18, 1927, 2 days before his voyage back to India, Tagore had composed a rousing song as he witnessed a tropical storm gathering on the horizon. He later inserted it as the grand finale of his dance drama, Tasher Desh, God Country, that he dedicated to Subhash Chandra Bose in the 1930s. Now we are in an enclosed hall, but I'm sure the scene that is being described in this poem, which I'll read to you in conclusion, is being enacted just outside if you go into the lobby. A fierce wind gusts, the clouds envelop all directions. O boatman, row your boat. Hold the helm in your tight grasp, I will lift and tie the sail. Come, pull with force, heave ho. The chains clank and clatter again and again. This is not the boat's fearful cry. The tether of restraint is not tolerable anymore. That is why today it is reeling. Come, pull with force, heave ho. Counting the days and moments, do not agitate your mind. Do not say to go or not to go. The ocean of doubt you will cross within. Do not look outside in anxiety. If the destroyer dances, his wild matted locks storm-ravaged, the waves below Do not be diffident. Dance to his rhythm. Sing the song of victory. Come, pull with force. Heave ho. Let me see if I can perform the Bengali original for you in conclusion. If some of you know it, you might be able to join. খর বায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে ওগনে নাও খানি বাইও খর বায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে ওগনে নাও খানি বাইও তুমি কোষে ধরো হাল আমি তুলে বাঁধি পাল তুমি কোষে ধরো হাল আমি তুলে বাঁধি পাল হাই মারো মারো টান হাইও 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 খর বায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে ওগনে নাও খানি বাইও শৃঙ্খলে বারবার ঝনঝন ঝঙ্কার নয় তরণীর ক্রন্দন শঙ্কার বন্ধন দুর্বার সহ্য না হয় আর টলমল করে আজ তাইও হাই মারো মারো টান হাইও 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 খর বায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে ওগনে নাও খানি বাইও গনি গনি দিন ক্ষণ চঞ্চল করি মন বলো না যাই কি নাই যাই রে সংশয় পারাবার অন্তরে হবে পার সংশয় পারাবার অন্তরে হবে পার উদ্বেগে তাকায় না বাইরে যদি মাতে মহাকাল উদ্দাম জটা জল ঝড়ে হয় লুণ্ঠিত ঢেউ ঢেউ তাল যদি মাতে মহাকাল উদ্দাম জটা জল ঝড়ে হয় লুণ্ঠিত ঢেউ ঢেউ তাল হয়েও না কুণ্ঠিত তালে তার দিও তাল জয় 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 গান গাইও হাই মারো মারো টান হাইও 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 খর বায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে ওগনে নাও খানি বাইও খর বায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে ওগনে নাও খানি বাইও থ্যাংক ইউ
It's about Tagore and Subhash Chandra Bose was just spellbinding. You might be aware that there was a book called The Penang Submarines during World War II that was done by, again, a person. And I think this story that you told about Bose must now be added to that little book when we do a reprint of that story. We were the German submarine command headquarters for Asia, which was a very interesting story that they chose Penang to be the headquarters. That's why the submarine operations particularly had that unique Penang link. We have about 15 minutes, if you don't mind, although we have taken you for, given you a very busy day today because we had half a day of a detailed workshop very early in the morning and then a meeting with the Chief Minister of Penang about how Penang and Calcutta can begin to reconnect and rediscover the many links and the many histories so that we can build on the past for a different kind of future. So please welcome, give us your name so that we know and can reply to you as a person rather than just as a body.
You have edged the universality of the Tagore's persona very well. Might I ask, what might be his early influences that shaped his persona, his thinking? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very, very good question. Tagore was molded by the intellectual and cultural ambience of late 19th century Bengal. And of course, there were major early 19th century figures, such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who was equally learned in the knowledge that came down in the classical languages like Sanskrit and Arabic, but he was fluent in English and French and Persian as well. And he had launched a religious and social reform movement seeking to return Hinduism to the what he saw as the original purity of the Upanishads. And Tagore's father, Debendranath Tagore, was a member of the association called Brahmo Samaj that had been established by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So Debendranath Tagore was clearly a very powerful influence on Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath was not as enamored of his grandfather, Dwarokanath Tagore, who was a major industrial entrepreneur. He was known as Prince Dwarokanath, but he was, I think, very devoted to his father, who took him to the Himalayas, for example. The mountains and the seas are the two symbols of the kind of universal humanity that he advocated. For example, it was his father, Debendranath Tagore, who first introduced Rabindranath to the poetry of Hafiz. And when Tagore went to Iran in 1932, the high point of his visit was his homage at the grave of the poets Sadi and Hafiz. And he opened Hafiz's Diwan and found a poem that was a message against narrow-minded, religious bigotry. A condemnation of the Zahir-e-Khutbin, those who appear to be religious but are not truly religious. So that kind of spirit, I think, is what he imbibed from the late 19th century. And that is what made him respectful of all religions. And I think Dr. Lalitha Sinha has already pointed out how, in fact, he was a firm believer in Hindu-Muslim unity, but a kind of unity which is to be seen as distinct from uniformity. He wanted to respect differences and then transcend them, rise above them to create a higher unity.
Any further questions? Yes, I'll get Dr. Uy first. Yes. Dr. Uy, and then
Japanese militarist regime. Can you please sort of elaborate on that? Thank you.
Gurudev, as he was known, the great teacher Rabindranath Tagore, and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose were critical of Japan's military adventurism in the early decades of the 20th century. Tagore was a great admirer of Japan. In the first decade of the 20th century, there were many young Asians who were enthused by Japan. And even if you look at the major Chinese figures, whether it was Sun Yat-sen or his rival Liang Qiqiao, they were both in Japan in the late 1890s. And Kang Yu-wei also sort of went there. And so there were Vietnamese, there were Filipino